Hello everyone. It's great to have you all here. Hope you're all safe, healthy, and have taken all required precautions against COVID-19. So before starting, let's revise some housekeeping that we did. If you have any trouble with the audio or the screen share, please use hard refresh. If it's still not working, try using a different browser. If the problem is still not resolved, you can use the chat option and let me know so that we will try to fix it. Nevertheless, we'll be sending you a recorded version of the webinar. Plus, there is also a handout that you can use to follow the webinar better in case you are lost in the middle. This handout is also helpful if you want to reach out to us for further queries later. And as far as the chat option is concerned, you can chat with the entire audience or you can chat with me personally as well. If you are going to reveal some kind of personal information about you or your company, I suggest you chat with me personally. I also like to point out that we have a set of polls here. I will be asking you to attend these polls during the course of the webinar so that I get to understand where you stand on some of the topics that we'll be covering. Please attend those polls so that we can make this session interactive and fun. After the webinar, I'll take some questions for which you can use the questions feature in Showtime. You can also send the questions to the email ID mentioned in the handout. That email ID will also be revealed at the end of the session. Now, let me introduce myself. I am Shivaram Pairajan, a customer education specialist in the ITSM team at ManageEngine. But before that, I spent over 2 years involved in a number of audits, coordinating with multiple teams, and I have given over 100 presentations to our teams and vendors regarding GDPR compliance and how they can achieve it, how they can approach it. Above all, I have been at the heart of process control. That is, to understand and realize how each business function is operating here at Zoho. My expertise is not only a result of me being in action, but also my interactions with number of specialists in the industry. So what I am going to give you today are the strategies that have been tried, tested, and are helping multiple teams with their process control and compliance efforts. So we'll be talking about two such strategies today, two main strategies. A different approach to documentation using the activity register, and B, a framework for process control that you can adopt. We will also see how we can apply that framework for effective compliance using ISO 27001 and GDPR as case studies. These frameworks and strategies, if implemented properly, will lay the foundation of transformation of and in your IT. What transformation am I talking about here? A transformation from having just any process in place to having a well-defined, well-controlled process in place that will enhance your productivity and also give you better results. A transformation from being an organization that works hard for compliance to an organization that works smart and effectively towards it by having a compliance-ready process control framework in place. That is what the transformation is all about. And that's what the title of the webinar says as well, doesn't it? It implies so, how to make your processes work to deliver better results using a transformational framework, correct? Yeah, that's what it's about. And I have introduced myself now. It's time for me to know about you. So take a moment. I'm going to open a poll here. I want to know where you're coming from, what your background is. Please take a moment to answer the poll. Are you a warrior of the pitch stop or a leader of sysadmins like that? Are you a chief information officer or a thought leader in your company who belongs to the top management? Are you from operations? Are you from mid management, or are you in some, are you none of the above? Oh, we have a good mix here. We really do. Yeah. So we see that the majority of our audience is from the mid management and top management. I would say that you should pay more careful attention because you are at the heart of process control. You are the fulcrum of process control and you should lead by example, especially if you it's completely fine because there is a lot you can take away from this webinar. Be it HR, sales, development, any other business function. We will discuss tools of process control that will transform your own perspective and would help you boost your productivity. So everybody has a good takeaway in this webinar. I think Asim has our video. Thank you. Now, I have been saying process control. What exactly do I mean by process control? Well, when the process goes as planned, everything is great, right? But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when something goes wrong? If at all you have a frozen screen, I suggest you try hard refreshing or trying a different browser and logging into the session. Thank you. When the process goes as planned, everything is great. But what happens when it doesn't? Say you're looking to move to a new vendor for your IT requirements. It's great if everything goes well, but what happens when your company's data in the vendor's database is compromised? That is a problem. Another simpler example now. You let your employees manage their own passwords for their office laptops. Well, as long as they do it okay, as long as they do it consistently, it's great. But what happens if they get logged out of their laptops when they are about to deliver a crucial webinar like I'm doing now? Again, things have gone wrong. This is when we need process control to ensure that your process is functioning effectively. In other words, it is achieving what exactly it's supposed to achieve. And the chances of things getting out of control are minimized. And I also see that we have lots of new attendees after the webinar kicked off. So just a quick recap for you people. There is a handout here. You can use that handout to get a hang of what we are actually doing in the webinar and how we are progressing. Even if you're lost, you can catch up a bit. Otherwise, it's okay. We'll still give you a recorded version of the webinar. We are still in the first slide, Mark. So we'll get back to process control. We see what exactly happens when you need process control. And when you establish process control, the byproduct of that is an easier journey to compliance. In fact, that is where we'll be starting our webinar. We'll be starting by busting some myths and misconceptions regarding compliance, and we'll go on to see how it's related to process control. We learn about the 3 P's and the importance of documentation. We'll then understand about standards and regulations. Then we'll go on to see 2 important efforts in process control: activity register and risk assessment, with which we'll create a framework. We will then end the session by doing some field testing of the framework with the help of case studies of ISO 27001 and GDPR. Yes, Enrico. Yeah. So let's start by analyzing what exactly is compliance. What do you think it is? Or what do your colleagues think it is? In many organizations, it is common to see compliance just as yet another problem to be solved. Oh, apart from my targets, I have to worry about compliance too. You might be thinking that, or you might also be thinking of it as just another complication. Come on, GDPR, CCPA, PDPA on one end, and ISO SOC, QMS on the other end, and they just keep growing. How many more of these? You might be a little bit frustrated with this, or you might also believe that it's just a time consumer. You do all these efforts for what? Are they really useful? Okay, to be honest, they are all fair beliefs, nothing wrong, but only until you truly understand what compliance is. In fact, the framework that we will see today will help you overcome these problems. So what is compliance really? I would say compliance is an assertion. How do you know your processes are achieving the desired results? When you try to comply, you're bound to demonstrate that your processes are actually achieving the desired results. Only when an external auditor asks you, you are going to demonstrate it. So compliance is simply the best way to know for sure that what you're doing is actually working. Compliance is a much needed brake to your corporate vehicle. Small trivia. Did you know that the first cars that were invented did not have brakes? A convoy of people had to run parallel to the car always. When the car needed to stop, they ran a bit faster and asked people to get out of the way until the car naturally decelerates and comes to a halt. What do you think is the maximum speed such a car could achieve? 10 km per hour? 15? That's what our Usain Bolt runs at. So after introducing brakes, the maximum speed took off like crazy. The reason? We can be sure that our progress neither hurts ourselves nor the subjects we deal with. And that's what compliance does to your business as well. Sunday, again, please try refreshing your browser. Try hard refresh. If not, try another browser. So we were speaking about breaks to your corporate vehicle. So every time you want to hire a new employee, you do a thorough background verification. Every time you pick your own data center, you follow a rigorous identity verification process. Now, all these are breaks. But when you do a background verification, you will never have to worry about the crucial resources integrity. If you make strict access controls a habit, you can handle any plausible malpractice confidently with assurance. So these breaks are crucial, and it's best if these breaks are fully functional all the time. Compliance is also an entry ticket. Compliance, if you're compliant to international standards, your customers trust you so that your processes are well established. Your trustworthiness in terms of process is enhanced. So your workforce might have any misconceptions that we mentioned earlier, and even you might have them. But it is time to pack all these misconceptions in a box and throw that box to another planet. Each member of your workforce must embrace compliance as an enabler. So we also saw that most of our audience is from mid-management and top management. So it is on you. It is on you in a leadership position to market compliance subtly as the true enabler. So I hope we both love compliance now. I'm assuming so. And we also have a good idea of process control. Now you should note that when you fix your process, when you establish proper process control, compliance to any standard or regulation will simply become a byproduct. So you got to work on your process so that you get better results, and you also don't have to worry about complying all the time. The framework we will see today will help you do exactly that. All you would then need for audits or compliance are minor tweaks to the framework. To establish process control, we need a dedicated team to drive it. The IT of an organization, as we discussed already, can lead the way to process control, but they won't have to do everything by yourself. You don't have to do it. First, you must form a central dedicated team. We call this team the SPA team, SPA, Security, Privacy, and Audit. Coincidentally, this SPA team eases your organization's experience of compliance. Yes, pun intended. So what does this team do? They are a stakeholder in every process. They facilitate process control. They are the consultants that guide you on how to get your process under control. And they are the biggest critics of your process. They also conduct internal audits and organize external ones. So let's take an example here. You're looking to get a cloud-based IT help desk software for your operations, or you might already have one. You might want to make a switch to a better one. So each of security, privacy, and audits will have their own questions about it. Security will think whether your data with the cloud vendor is actually safe at rest, whether that cloud vendor has enough impetus to keep it safe. And privacy will ponder what kind of information are we talking about? What is the category? If it's personal information, does it really need to be transferred? Do enough people in your organization have access to compromise privacy? And if audits are thinking about this, they will see what is the company's transfer on policy of information, whether these transfers are according to the policy, whether there is a written proper procedure for it. So this is how each member or each section of this party ponders about similar things. Each of these parties will actually ask a lot more questions. So ideally, any activity or process that happens in any of your team must go through the radar of SPA. And they will ask these questions to make it compliant with the standards and regulations you choose. So I did say any process, right? Which is just one of the P's of our 3P concept. The people, process, and product. People are your employees. Each employee must know what process they are a part of. That is how you link people to process. And each process must deliver a product. But this is the deviation from the usual people, process, technology framework that you hear all the time. Products here are deliverables. Every process must deliver something. Well, if it doesn't, you should question the existence of the process. Likewise, if people cannot be mapped to a particular process, it means they don't have enough understanding. To obtain a better understanding, they can get the help of SPA team to understand which process they are actually linked to. So having a clear, interconnected matrix of people, process, and products will help you reduce compliance into easily manageable silos. To realize this 3P in practice, you need a framework. And the biggest roadblock you will find in creating that framework is a mindset that most of us hold. the boredom or fear of documentation. So this could be a hated term in your company when you say documentation, but documentation really is the game changer. And let me tell you, it's not just for compliance, but it's for the overall performance of your company. In fact, to be very honest, I find it surprising that most of us do not understand documentation as one of the important aspects of business. Sunny, I have not muted the audio. I think you have to refresh, hard refresh, or change the browser again. So I do. So it is surprising that most of us do not understand documentation as the most primary aspect of business. If you find it difficult to write down your own process, how can you expect to control the process? How can you even expect to improve it? And if there is absolute clarity about your process, documenting it shouldn't be a problem. In fact, documenting a process will only give a better clarity about it. If at all you did hate documentation, it is time to turn a new leaf and embrace the game changer. Effective documentation will give you substantial control over the process, and it will solve practical nitty-gritties in your audits. You will find it a lot easier to deal with international standards like ISO and SOC since you would have gathered enough documents. Your documentation would have taken care of most of your audits, and it will also help you establish a better communication with auditors as they look at your documents first before talking to you about your process. So buckle up and be prepared to do some comprehensive documentation. We will look at two such areas that require major documentation: the activity register and risk assessment. But before jumping into these areas, it will help us to actually fix our compliance objectives first. So we will see what are standards and what are regulations. Starting with regulations, you would have heard of GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA. All these are regulations. They are simply a set of laws that dictate how companies should process data. Any regulation will stand on top of four pillars: principles, rules, rights, and responsibilities. Principles are the values that these governing bodies want you to keep in mind, and rules are what happens when you don't exactly comply with the regulation. For example, in GDPR, Chapter 2 is entirely dedicated for principles, and Article 83 is dedicated for telling you about the fines that would be levied if at all you don't comply with the regulation. Principles and rules come in handy when you draft policies to govern your organization. And rights to the subjects and responsibilities of bodies, these two pillars can directly affect the processing activities of your organization. So that is how regulations affect your process. In fact, the best way to learn regulations is to work in conjunction with your legal advisor and obtain their guidance to apply the regulation to your process. Next is my personal favorite, standards. So think about this. When you ask 10 pounds of sugar, how do you know that the shopkeeper gave you 10 pounds and not 8.9? Well, thanks to the international system of units, a standard, you both have the same understanding of what a pound actually is. In other words, standards make sure that the service provider and service receiver are on the same page. All communications need a standard to be effective. The server understands the clients through the Transfer Control Protocol or TCP. Likewise, the US government understands service providers through FedRAMP. So when service providers comply with or get certified to standards, users will know what to expect of them. Like regulations, standards also have definitions, controls, and requirements. So the key here is to understand the definitions and map the controls to your process. We'll see how. We'll use the case study of ISO 27 and see exactly what I mean here. So a quick recap now. We saw the 3 Ps that matter. We understood why we should embrace documentation. And we also know what we are trying to achieve with standards and regulations. It is time to put all these and form a bigger picture. Where do you actually start? I would say you start with accountability. Accountability is when the people of the 3P owns up the process, which is another P. Meaning, every member of your organization must be accountable for the compliance and control of their process. Otherwise, take it from me, your SPA team is going to have a tough marathon running around hundreds of teams trying to fix each of their processes. It's simply not scalable and it won't work unless each employee, each member of your organization is accountable for their own process. So right now, I want you to take a quick break and attend a poll. In fact, I'm going to take a break when I want you to attend a poll. The poll here I'm going to open asks you, do you have a list of processing activities or list of any activities on an inventory where you record everything you do? So you may have it, you may not have it, or you would have it, but not exactly a comprehensive list. Come on, hit me. So most of us do have a list. but we don't have it as comprehensively as we want it to. It's fair enough because that is what we are trying to do here. That is, we are trying to bring that process into control. So think about this. What happens when thousands of activities performed by multiple teams come together? Well, that is your company. Your company is the synergy of thousands of such activities. And every time you rectify an activity and improve it, how will you ensure that all such activities across your organization have been rectified and improved in the same manner? Say, for example, a quality assurance guy from your, you make software products and you give software services, and one person from your quality assurance team has used the list of emails of prospects, which is real-time customer data, which should never be used for testing, but he did. And now all those prospects have got a completely irrelevant mail when the feature went live. Now they are not going to like it. Now, we don't know how this happened. Maybe the data was not labeled properly. Maybe it was not stored in a secure location. Maybe someone from the network operations team provided an access they shouldn't have, but a mistake is a mistake. Every single activity of this could have contributed to this particular screw up. So you have spotted the mistake and rectified it. Now, how do you ensure each person on this activity list or each person involved in this particular process won't commit the same mistake again? Well, only when each person is recorded and you know who's accountable for what. If each employee does not take accountability for their actions, it is impossible to ensure that they would not commit the same mistake again. I think of 2 or 3 of us are still having problem with the audio. I would suggest you try hard refresh, and if you still have existing problems, I would suggest you change to another browser. So carrying on, we know that accountability is the key to establishing a proper process which is ready for compliance. So the same applies to other activities as well, not just this QA, marketing, sales, HR, it is the same. So accountability is a principle, and to bring it to practice, we start with our first major documentation effort, the activity register. So your company is the sum of all activities, and to bring accountability to activities, we will use RACI or RACI, responsible, consulted, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So activity register will have the list of activities. Each of those activities will have RACI. So there is a parent activity which has a child activity, which might further have many child activities. I want you to look at the structure part of this slide here. So to get a better understanding of this particular activity tree, we'll take an example. So you're supposed to onboard a new employee who has just been hired by your organization. That is an activity which involves many sub-activities, right? It's a high-level activity. So we'll see how to apply activity tree to that. Typically, employee onboarding starts right when the request for the opening is made, and it goes on until a week after the employee is actually joined. But for the convenience of this webinar and for the simplicity of explanation, we'll stick to only a limited number of activities. So an employee onboarding is the parent activity, which has 3 major child activities: preparing workstations, providing orientations, and setting follow-up emails. Child activity 1 is preparing workstations, which further has 2 child activities: setting up hardware and setting up an online presence. Setting up an online presence has 2 more child activities: creating a corp email ID and creating an entry in HRMS portal. So in this case, setting up an online presence becomes the parent activity and is further divided into child activities, which could again be divided. So what I did here was that I applied the template on the left-hand side to the example on the right-hand side. So look at child activity 2. In this particular diagram, it is providing orientation, which has 2 more child activities: creating bank accounts and verifying documentations, which are further divided. So this keeps going on. At this point, you should have rightly gotten 2 questions popping into your head. Number 1, how long will the activity tree keep branching? Where is the end? Does it even end? Is it infinity? Number 2, there are literally hundreds of activities like onboarding, travel request, lead generation, development, production, sales, support. How many trees will you actually draw? Is it even practical to draw so many trees and save each image like that? Can you even use it later? Well, to answer both, we must simply do one small activity: simplify the tree and put it inside a table. This way. So what you see here is the same exact activity tree we saw in the last example. So the tree structure will actually help you determine or visualize how to form this tree. But the table here is the best method for documentation. You can check it out here. You have a parent activity named ABC-operations. Well, assume ABC is the name of the company you work for. Under ABC operations, you have a child activity, sysadmin. Now, in the next row, sysadmin will become the parent activity, which has onboarding as a child activity. In the subsequent row, onboarding is the parent activity, which has 3 child activities. Likewise, the tree is represented using a parent-child relationship. If an activity can be divided further, it becomes a parent activity in the next row, which will further be divided into child activities. Now, coming to the next question. When should you stop dividing? Well, the answer is simple. You should stop dividing when you find a unique accountable person for it. In this example, you didn't stop with the child activity preparing workstations because it had 2 more child activities, setting up an online presence and setting up hardware, for which 2 different people are accountable. So you had to divide it. But you stopped branching the tree at sending follow-up emails. Why? Because Julie Ann is the single unique accountable person for it. Now, even though sending follow-up emails may have more activities, there is no different unique accountable person. That is just Julie Ann, and she probably take care of the other activities herself. That is why you stop the tree. So it is a practical approach. If there is one unique accountable person, you stop dividing the tree, you stop branching the tree, you cut off all branches. But that's it. Bingo. You have the activity tree for one major activity called onboarding. Likewise, you can create this for all business functions: marketing, sales, production, support, HR, you name it. A consolidated list of all activities of all such functions will be your activity. However, you are supposed to remember a few important pointers. What are they? Instances of activities need not be mentioned. For example, you don't have to mention the name of every employee you onboard. Well, the HRMS portal takes care of it. So you just have to mention the activities and who's accountable for it. Another example of instances is campus recruitment. While campus recruitment is a parent activity which will be mentioned in the activity register, campus recruitment for the year 2020 from a particular college is an instance. These instances will be handled using project management tools like Zoho projects. One thumb rule is if the same activity is repeated over time, those instances need not be mentioned. Next, you need not mention mundane actions like logging into an account or accessing a server. For these, you can simply create procedure documents. For the last child that cannot be divided anymore, example, sending follow-up emails. For that, you can simply draft a procedure which says which email ID to use, what detail to incorporate, all that. Next, if similar activities are repeated over multiple teams or projects, you can mention the project name along with the activity. This is for clarity. For example, sales is a parent activity which has many sub-activities, but a car manufacturing plant like Tesla might have different sales teams under various cars. So the same set of activities repeat, but under different circumstances. In this case, you may have the parent activity as sales-Tesla Model 3, sales-Tesla Model X, sales-Tesla Model Y, and so on. This way, salespersons for all these cars would participate in the activity tree, and all sales activities will be included. Murad and Sharif, don't worry, we'll provide you the link of the video of the webinar. So please try refreshing and try to get back to the webinar. Thank you. So the most important pointer to remember is no person in your workforce must be missing in the activity register. Everyone should be there mapped against the process they are part of. So we now have the activity tree in the form of a table and we call it the activity register. All we need now is a touch of RACI magic. So RACI. Accountable person is not in a, the activity isn't owned appropriately if it's just the accountable person there, right? So the one who takes charge of the activity is of course the accountable person. He is ultimately answerable for it. But the responsible person who comes under the column R is the one who actually performs the activity. This can be a person, a team, or an ad hoc group. They answer to the accountable person. For consulted, they are the subject matter experts. Their opinions are consulted before taking a decision in the activity. And informed are those who must be kept in the loop for the activity. In this particular activity of preparing workstations, HR team is kept informed so that they can update their records. A manager is consulted so that he gives inputs on what kind of hardware and software it's needed. For every activity in your register, you would have identified 4 groups, R, A, C, and I. That is when your activity is owned appropriately. And why do I call this magic? Because it is a productivity booster and it solves real life problems that you did not even know would be there. No more uncertainty regarding who makes decisions, no more creation and engaging in non essential work to just fill time, no more questions over who does what. A reactive work environment is transformed into a proactive one. And nobody would blame others for not getting their work done. Why? Because the activity is owned appropriately. They know exactly who is accountable and who is responsible for it. When you go about creating this activity register, you have 3 methods to do it. The first is you can simply ask each person in your company to write down what they are doing and you can formulate it into a register. But if your organization is too big and you feel it's a laborious work, you can go for method number 2, where you assign managers for this project. Ask managers to, excuse me, I think someone else is having a problem with the audio. Yes, Asim, we are recording this session and we will give you the link. So you can assign managers for this project. Ask them to jot down the activity that they are part of. And then ask them to jot down whatever activity happens in their team and ask accountable people to tag themselves. The third one is my personal favorite, is the SPA team creating a list of standard activities. So the SPA team gives those list of standard activities to managers who then customize it to suit their teams. So if you do this, suddenly your process seems to be under a bit of control. The role of SPA team here would be to create a central repository where this activity register with RACI can be stored. They give appropriate access and they make sure that no activity that goes into the register goes without their notice. So you know that your process is coming under a bit of control. With the activity register, you know what activity is happening in your company. Now, it's time to know if it's actually happening the way it should. How do we do it? One answer, risk assessment. But before we go to risk assessment, I want you to take another poll. How do you assess risks? Do you actually use a standard methodology like the NIST framework? Or do you simply use your logic? Please go ahead, give me votes. So, we do have a good mix here. I actually love this audience because we are totally in the group. We are a good mix of all opinions. So now we see that most of them use their logic. Some of them also use a proper framework. If you ask me, it should be a mixture of both. We'll see how that is. But first, we'll start with the risk definition. What is risk? Risk is the uncertainty of not achieving an objective. Let's take an example. Your company wants to increase the revenue by 200% in the forthcoming financial year. That's the objective. You can do this you can achieve that by the help of these 4 steps. I want you to just zoom into your screen and look at the image. So you can use any of these 4 steps. Let's take an example. You can venture into a new location tomorrow to gather new customers from there, but you might not be able to achieve it due to privacy regulations, loss of the land, the difference in customer expectations. These uncertainties are called risks. And to control these uncertainties or risks, you perform certain activities like data protection impact assessments, seeking legal advice beforehand. So these uncertainties or risks will also affect other aspects of your organization. Say, your organization's policy on business expansion, your assets like data centers, existing production facilities, etc. So this is how the risks that involve are uncertainties and they affect other areas of process control. So what we discussed just now is the risk assessment. So for each of your activities, big or small, in your activity registers, you have objectives. The uncertainties of not achieving them would become risks, for which you need controls. Some of these risks might remain even after the control. They are the worst case scenarios which you must be prepared for. Your objectives will also influence the policies, or it could be the vice versa as well. Your policies could affect the objectives. And all these risks, these uncertainties will probably involve an asset, will affect an asset. It could be an information asset or a non-information asset. Non-information assets are your computers, Photoshop licenses, which are predominantly products that you consume, and information assets are business critical information and personal data of your customers, including your personal data even includes your employees and leases information. So you can manage these assets using the same approach that we took for activities, creating an asset register. I would like to call it the information asset register. You can further capture the flow of data using diagrams. This way, you will know the assets related to a particular activity. So let's take a quick example for a smaller activity. I want to deliver a product presentation at an event, which is an activity of marketing. My objective here is lead nurturing and lead generation. There could be uncertainties which could sabotage this objective. Well, scenarios like losing my laptop, getting locked out at the last moment because of a password reset, a glitch in the presentation software, or low attendance at the event, or people not attending at all. All these are risks, and each risk will have a control, and each risk will affect an asset. The laptop used for the presentation is a non-information asset, and the information asset could include the presentation itself or the personal data of the attendees. So think about this, a diagram involving the flow of such information assets through my laptop, the CRM database, the automatically triggered emails for follow-up will constitute a typical data flow diagram. Well, remember these diagrams? These diagrams are going to come in handy when we discuss GDPR compliance. For every risk related to an activity, as an asset is involved, and whether you want to protect it or not using a control must be determined by you, or more specifically, this party. So you now know what activities happen in your organization, and you know how well they are happening. Activity register was the list of your process, and risk assessment is how you got those process under control. There you have it, process control. See what I did there? That was a pun, and that was very much intended. So this process control is now going to help us give rise to a framework for compliance. So I want you to visualize this framework as a tabular column. Each row will have elements with regards to columns. So each row has an activity. The list of activities is your rows, and the columns are boxes. Each of these boxes after activities are columns. Objectives, deliverables, RAS, they are all columns. Each activity has an objective and a deliverable. And after the deliverables, we have RAS, which we already discussed. And after RAS, we have assets. Assets involved in each activities. Well, it could have multiple categories. As I already said, you could classify it as information and non-information. You can also classify it in other ways you like. But before talking more about classification, this time I want to know your opinion. Yes, just your opinion. I want you to attend another poll that I'm going to open right now. How important is it to classify information assets and deal with them separately? I just want to know whether you think it's really important or not important at all. Come on, give me the ratings. So there we have it. I'm so happy that most of us think it's actually important. The most clicked star is 4-star, which is quite good. It's really good. Trust me. So we all understand that there needs to be some classification for information. So after assets, now I want you to remember this particular poll because it's going to come in handy during our GDPR discussion. So after assets, we move on to risk assessment, where we have a risk table. And apart from that, we have policies and procedures that help us in guidance and evaluation. For activities which cannot be broken down into more activities, there should be a procedure document. And this procedure document must further have metrics for monitoring and measurement. These metrics, you will get the webinar handout, and you'll get the recorded version as well. Sorry for the glitches. We really don't know if it's where the root cause of the problem is. We'll figure it out. Thank you. So we were at the evaluation and improvement. So how do you know what parameters to check? It will be based on two questions. What will be checked to ensure that the process is actually followed? What parameters will be ensured? What parameters will be checked to ensure constant progress? What do you define as progress? Whether you achieve that progress, how you measure it. So this is how you monitor and evaluate your activities. And each activity can be linked to a standard or a regulation. So this is how your framework will look. And how you can use this framework is the real goal here. Trust me, this is useful in a lot of ways. I am just listing down a few ways that you can get started with. So for records of processing activities of the GDPR, you can directly use our activity register. And for the product registry, which will be useful in your ISO audits. You can use the deliverables, and using the list of policy statements, you can draft organization-wide policies. And the assets involved versus RASI, if you bring out that mapping, it's going to help you in asset management and ownership. The risk versus control is nothing but your risk register, which is the crucial part of any audit. And activities versus applicable standard codes is going to help you bring out the statement of applicability. That is again crucial in any of your audit. So we established process control, which gave rise to a framework. Now you see how this framework is helping you with compliance. So we all agree that it helps with compliance, but it's important that we field test it, right? So we are going to do that now. For field testing, we'll use case studies. The first case study is that of ISO 27001. So first things first, let me tell you that I won't be going through the inches of ISO 27001 handbook. We will see how this framework can be applied to ISO 27001 alone. So for detailed discussion on ISO, this is not the webinar for it. We will just see the application of our framework. So the first major challenge when you approach ISO 27001 would be to determine the context of your organization. So context here means the scope of ISO 27001 audit in terms of location, the products that you want to audit, the business functions that you want to audit. All these things are the preparatory or preliminary works for the ISO 27001 audit. So after you do these preliminary works, you will see how our framework is going to help you when you mean business. Section 5 deals with leadership and policy. Our framework links directly to policies and activities. There you go. Section 6 deals with planning, which mainly addresses objectives and related risks. We have mapped each activity with required objectives. If you summarize these, you can get the list of relevant objectives. And when the auditor asks you some question like, give me the marketing related objectives in outbound marketing, you can just filter outbound marketing and give them even the specific region for outbound marketing. It's very simple. Just a linear search would give you the data. And section 8 deals with information security risks. Our framework is going to help you derive all risks by default because it is connected to information assets. For example, let's say the auditor asks you the risk in your SDLC or software development lifecycle. You simply do a linear search for software development lifecycle. You filter out risks. That is how you get the information risk. And for the last two sections here, which are evaluation and improvement, we just discussed a metric-based approach where each activity is monitored, evaluated, and improved. Say the auditor asks you, how do you ensure effectiveness of your support process? You know what parameters you use. It could be the number of tickets closed per day or the average time for closing a ticket. Any such parameters that you define, you can easily extract from this particular activity register. And clauses 4 to 10 here are very crucial, and the auditor will definitely go ask you for evidences. The annexure has 114 controls, which you can map with respect to the suitability of your organization with respect to the context. And also remember that we linked activities to standard codes. So when you compile that, you will have the statement of applicability. Boom. This framework has put you in a much better place with respect to ISO 27001. And other standards like ISO 27017 or 18 or even SOC standards have the same structures. It's all about the set of controls, mapping them to your activities. With efforts from your SPA team and this particular framework, you are in a much better platform. So there we go. It does help in our ISO 27001 standards. How does it hold against regulations? There comes the second case study, GDPR. So complying to regulations requires legal expertise, but our framework is going to save you a lot of time. And I'll give you the same disclaimer I gave you for ISO 27001 audits. This is not a webinar on GDPR. This is a webinar on overall compliance. So we will see how this particular framework helps you, puts you in a much better position when you try to comply with GDPR. So coming to GDPR now, the key to understanding any regulation is first trying to understand what they stand for. GDPR stands for empowering the user over their data and enhancing an organization's sensitivity towards the data. Very specifically, personal data. And above all, it's a regulation. You are not going to be fined 20 million euros overnight if at all a hacker does steal data from your systems. God forbid, I really hope it doesn't happen. But if at all it does, the litigation will go on until the court decides how much fine you should pay, if at all you must. So nobody can ensure 100% security or privacy. The court acknowledges it. And in the unfortunate scenario that you do something, if at all something does go wrong, If you demonstrate your best efforts towards establishing controls, there is a good chance you can get away with fines, with very minimal fines. To demonstrate that commitment, our framework will help you because the court will know you did your best. So left-hand side are the elements of framework, right-hand side are the important sections of GDPR. We have just mapped those two. So the first and foremost way to demonstrate that good practice is to comply with Article 30 or the records of processing activities. How do you do that? You simply use your activity register. Using activity register, you build a record of processing activities. Then I would move on to GDPR Chapter 4, which describes the roles of controllers and processors. You become a controller for the data you choose. For example, try to recollect the example we saw for cloud IT vendor. So you're trying to move to a help desk software. So that vendor is a processor, and the data that you hold on your employees and your customers, you are the controller for it. So determine for which activities you are the controller and for which activities you are the processor. Then go to Article 24, which says what activities you must perform as a controller. Pick those activities and be ready for them. Then Article 25 talks about data protection by design. This can be ensured with the help of a risk assessment. Analyze risks even before the activity happens and place necessary controls. One such activity could be creating a landing page. It involves a lot of personal data of your leads. So you do a risk assessment for this activity and protect the data even before it reaches the landing page. This works best for all activities, including that of controllers and processors. Likewise, Article 35 provides information on data protection impact assessments. So your SPA team is going to come in here, and any change to your activity register must go through this team. That is when you do DPIA. Likewise, I would say you can analyze each and every section of our activity register. Chapter 2 is entirely dedicated for principles. These are related to policies of the organization. In our framework, dealing policies and activities, the main principle is the lawful basis of processing. GDPR gives you 6 lawful bases. Remember, previously we determined for which activities you are the controller. So for these activities, you choose the appropriate lawful basis and record it. Boom, your activity is lawful. Chapter 3 lays down GDPR's rights to the data subjects. Remember that poll on data classification or classification of information assets? If you had tagged the information assets for each activity, this would be a cakewalk for you. Let's take an example of landing pages. What are the information assets involved there? The name of the prospect, the email ID, company details, location, and could be a lot more. So, where do you store these data? Who else gets access to these information assets? So, if you ask all these questions, and the collection of such information is your information asset register. And what's next? Risk assessment. How do the uncertainties in this activity affect these information assets? So that is how you comply with one of the pillars of the regulation, that is the data subject rights. So this type of analysis will play a crucial role in providing clarity on where the information is. This way, when any right, say right to be forgotten or right to access or right to rectification is invoked, you would be ready. Again, I would love to go on and on, but this is not a webinar on GDPR, and we have almost come to the end of the webinar. So to wrap up this session, we'll have a quick recap. We understood the importance of IT in bringing forward a transformation. We saw how to perceive it as 3 Ps, how to perceive process control as 3 Ps, and how to bring in a central team to do it. We then saw the importance of documentation and how it's going to help you bring accountability, followed by the activity register and RASI. We then saw risks through the lens of objectives and how it's going to affect other areas of process. We then created a framework that will be the basis of process control and hence compliance, and we concluded with the case studies. I would also like to tell you that I am coming up with a much more detailed book on the same topic of process control. It is in works now and it will be out soon. So those who attended this webinar can look forward to get the copy first. You'll be receiving a mail too. And I would like to thank you all for attending the webinar. You have been a great audience. And I'm really sorry for those people who had issues with audio and couldn't attend the full session properly. Let me assure you that we have a recorded session of the webinar and you will be receiving the link soon. So now I open the webinar for questions. You can ask me questions on this questions panel, or you can mail me the questions. If it's a detailed discussion of any insights that you want, you can mail it to me at itsmc@zohocorp.com. I would love to answer each and every question. So let's start with the questions. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Najib. It was happy. It was a very good webinar. You guys really participated in all the polls and you did really great. Thank you. We have a question here. How can this be integrated into ME Service Desk? It's a very good question, Mark. So what do you think is ME Service Desk? It is nothing but the list of activities that's already happening. Imagine you have an activity register and your instances in ME Service Desk Plus is in tune with your activity register. So what would happen is you can measure and monitor each activity on your activity register with the help of ME Service Desk Plus. Be it one of your sysadmins who wants to close a ticket, which will be an activity in your activity register. So if you look at our framework, you will see that one of the important aspects is improvement and measurement. So for that, our ME Service Desk Plus is really going to help you. Plus, you can also, straight down go to the accountability. Thank you, Mark. We have a next question. Could you please share the slides with us after the session is finished? Yes, Sharif, you do have the handout. The handout is exactly the same as the slides. In fact, it has a much more detailed description. And you will also get the recorded webinar. You'll also get the link for the recorded webinar. Mark, I hope your question is clear. Any other questions? Yeah. May I use ISO 27001 plus GDPR? I don't really get your question. I mean, you're asking if this framework can be used for both these, for complying to both ISO 27001 and GDPR. Yes, why not? In fact, that is the point of this framework. The whole point of creating a framework is so that you won't have to worry about ISO 27001, 17, 18, SOC, QMS. No, you don't have to worry about all that. You just need to establish this framework and do minor tweaks to this framework to get ready for particular audits. The same goes for regulations too. How will it ensure the delivery of quality work? How will it ensure the delivery of quality work using this process? Good question, Rajendra. So if you look at the framework, the last two, not exactly the last two, the two boxes or the two columns before that said metrics for evaluation and improvement. So let me assume you have an activity tree. The last child of the activity tree has a procedure and you have metrics to ensure that procedure is followed. So the quality of the work is determined by the quality of the metrics you choose. Rather than how you do it, it is about what metrics you choose to select and improve. So every activity you have and you have the metrics for it. So correlate your metrics with the activity. Boom. That is how you ensure the quality of work. How do you have any tools or recommendations? Yeah. Purnanand. Thanks. It's a good question. I would say it is different for each and every organization. Yes, Zoho is coming up with such a, Manage Engine is coming up with such a tool. It is in works now, so you can expect it, but I can't give you any promises on that tool because it's still under progress. What I do give you is you can actually use Zoho Work Drive itself. Why do I say that? Because all these activity registers can simply be measured or monitored using an Excel sheet. If your organization is say about 10 to 15 people, Excel sheets are more than enough. Or if you still have doubts, or if it's still not sufficient for you, I would suggest you go for Zoho Creator. Using Zoho Creator, you can create a glorified version of the same Excel sheet. You can collect data from multiple employees, and you can generate reports for which you can use Zoho reports as well. So the Zoho suite is definitely going to help you with this. Any other questions? Yeah. Are there framework templates you use or advice? Yes, Mark. The framework that I gave you is the framework template. So if you look at each of the boxes carefully, you will see that each of those are particular aspects of an activity. Say, RASI is an aspect of the activity. Procedure is an aspect of the activity. Risk is an aspect of the activity. So you have to determine which of these aspects is most suitable for your organization. You can pick out those aspects and you can create your own framework. There is no necessity to follow all these columns or to use each of these things in your framework. You can pick and choose the ones which are most suitable for you. It could ensure a great process on the hindsight, but quality of work is somehow independent of activity. Yes, Rajendra, I would somewhat agree with your statement. But I would also say that what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So the quality of work, how do you ensure that it's actually quality? For example, Rajendra might have a different opinion about quality and Shiva might have a different opinion about quality. To standardize these, it is important to give out metrics. That is one of the key aspects of our framework, is evaluation and improvement. So you have an activity, you develop metrics for quality. So you pit your activity against those metrics. That is how you move towards better quality. We have some question on chats. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ponanan. Thanks, Louis. I think we have a bit of time for more questions. Users' perception of quality is final. Yes, Rajendra. I'm not. To clarify things with you, we are not talking about the customers. So your customers might determine the quality of your product, which I would say is the experience rather than their perception. It would be about how you make them feel about your product. But what I'm mentioning here is the process inside your company. And let me tell you, it is very much possible to gauge user experience, to understand how they are feeling about your product with the help of a few parameters. So why can't you apply those parameters to your activity register? Well, I won't say it's difficult. We do that here at Zoho. So how do our customers feel about our product? We create parameters, we correlate them with our activities. That is how you link external perception to internal quality. What are the standards? You talked 27,070 and 27,080. Anthony, it's not 27,070, it's 27,017. So ISO 27001 is the base standard. It is in fact the default standard for most service companies, IT service companies. 27,017 and 18 are better specifications. One of them stands for incident management. So ISO 27000 is the 1001 is the base. If at all you use our framework to comply with the audit, 27,017 and 18 are but special aspects. One of the aspects inside ISO 27001. It could be risk assessment. It could be incident management. That is what I spoke about. If you comply with 27,001, all these are going to be cakewalks. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Anthony. I meant 27,017 and 18. Thank you. I think we have time to take 2 more questions here. And if you can formulate the questions, but you don't have enough clarity to ask, please feel free to take the time and mail to us at itsmce@zohocorp.com. I will elaborately answer each and every one of your questions. But if you do have questions now, you can ask. I really appreciate Rajendra for asking that particular question. How will it ensure the delivery of quality work using this process? Quality of work is crucial. That is what we are trying to achieve with the help of metrics. So thanks, Rajendra, for the question. Thank you all for asking sensible questions. We should have any behavior on the compliance or need to know about how to deal with some risk. I don't understand when you meant behavior on compliance, but risk itself is a crucial aspect of compliance. So most of the audits, just a moment, Mark, will you send the copy of slideshow afterwards? I'm not exactly sure if we are allowed to send the slideshow. I think we can upload it on SlideShare and maybe share the link to you. I'm not sure, but I can assure you that you will receive a YouTube. I mean, you'll receive the link for the recorded webinar. Now, getting back to the question, risk. Yeah, the whole point of compliance, the whole point of external audits, the whole point of process control is to make sure that your process comes under very minimal risk. Whatever risk that might come, you predict it, you model it using a risk assessment framework, and you apply controls to minimize it even before it happens. So I believe that is what you mentioned by behavior. So if you do that risk assessment properly, your entire behavior towards your process is going to change because you are well informed about the risks even before they happen. Could you make such webinar more example oriented rather than too much of theory? Yes, Rajendra. We gave lots of examples. We gave examples regarding landing pages, the onboarding activities process. So we selected examples that is understood by the general audience. So that is why maybe you feel the examples were, maybe you wanted more examples. It's a good idea. We can actually make a webinar stating completely an example of a new startup or whatever it is. Thanks, Rajendra. We will consider it. And if you want any specific examples for any specific aspect of this particular webinar, you can mail it to us. I'll give you lots of examples. We have lots of case studies as well. I hope all our questions are clear. Yeah, thanks, Ajendra. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ashish. Thanks for your questions. Thanks, Punanand. Oh, Yasin has asked if you will get certificate of attendees. No, Yasin, as far as this particular moment is concerned, we have not planned to give certificates. I'm sorry. So I guess that's it with the questions. I will end this session in 1 or 2 more minutes. Thank you all for being a part of this session. You were a great audience. You were very interactive. You participated and you conducted the session along with me. Really appreciate your time here. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to hear more from you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you again. I'm going to end the session now. Have a nice day. Thank you.